welcome back for another Music Theory Bite. In this video, I'm going to be talking about modal mixture. If that sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, then this is the video for you. Modal mixture is sometimes called modal borrowing, and the way it works is fairly simple. We have keys, major and minor keys, and if you take a look at what goes into a key, you'll see that we have these scale degrees. So for example, I have the key of A major and A minor, both on the screen right now. And you can see that there are four notes between the two keys that are exactly the same: A, B, D, and E, scale degrees 1, 2, 4, and 5. Between those two keys, there are three scale degrees that are different. Scale degree 3, in A major it's C sharp, in A minor it's C natural. Scale degree 6, in A major it's F sharp, A minor it's F natural, although we do have an F sharp available if we raise that scale degree 6. And scale degree 7, in A major, it's G sharp. In A minor, it is G natural, but we also have available to us the variable scale degree 7, the G sharp, if we put a leading tone on things. Let's talk about how borrowing those scale degrees actually affects the chords that show up in the major and minor mode. Now, practically speaking, almost all modal borrowing involves borrowing scale degrees from the minor mode into the major mode. There's only one instance of the opposite, borrowing a major scale degree into the minor mode, which happens with any frequency. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Almost all modal borrowing is taking scale degrees that show up in the parallel minor mode and bringing them into the major mode. We're taking those three scale degrees that are different between the two, scale degree 3, scale degree 6, and scale degree 7, and we're using those to create new tonal colors of the chords we already have. Let's see how that works. Let's talk about what happens when we borrow each of those scale degrees into our tonal system. So for example, we know we have scale degrees 3, 6, and 7 are the possible borrowings. So if we're going along in the major mode, and we want to borrow scale degree 3 into the major mode, that is, take that lowered third scale degree from the minor mode and use it in the major mode, there are three places, three chords where we see that showing up. We have the 3 chord, which we don't use all that often, so that's one we can kind of forget about. We can take that scale degree 3 and treat it as the third of our 1 chord, which happens with some frequencies. So in this case, what we'd be doing is we'd be going along maybe from a 1 chord to a 4 chord to a 5 chord, and then when we come back to our 1 chord, we can substitute it with a minor 1 chord, which kind of creates an interesting color, and then we can go on in the minor mode for a little bit longer if we really wanted to, and come back to major at the end. If we take that scale degree 3 and we treat it as the 5th of the chord, what we're dealing with then is the submedian chord, or the 6th chord. And that's an interesting sound also, because we can start out with our tonic chord, and then we can move straight to our 6th chord. We'll go to our diatonic 6th chord for starters. And then let's move this to our borrowed 6th chord, that is our lowered 6th chord. Wonderful sound there. And then we can go from there into all sorts of different places. Let's go to a 4 chord, and then we can go to a 5 chord, and then back to our 1 chord. Could you hear how that lowered scale degree 3 in that 6th chord creates that nice, beautiful, dark sound? Now you'll also notice that when I did that, I had to borrow in scale degree 6 also, because that goes along to create a diatonic chord that we would expect. So in a sense, we're borrowing the entire chord from the minor mode into the major mode. Scale degree 7, we can borrow that into 3 different chords. We can borrow that into a 7 chord, which we don't have a lowered 7 chord in the major mode, so that doesn't work if it's the root of the chord. If it's the third of the chord, it would be a dominant, and that would make a minor dominant, which is just kind of weird and modal sounding, so we don't do that all that often. And then if we have it as the 5th of the chord, we're going to see that being the 3 chord, which, as we already said, we don't use that all that often. So borrowing lowered scale degree 7 doesn't happen all that often. Scale degree 6, this is where the fun actually begins. Scale degree 6 is the hallmark of our predominant function chords. All of our predominant function chords, the 2, the 4, and the 6, use scale degree 6 in them. So if we borrow in that lowered scale degree 6, we are changing the color and the directionality or the impetus towards resolution of those predominant chords, making them drive even more towards that dominant. And the reason that happens is lowered scale degree 6, my favorite scale degree, is a half step away from scale degree 5, so that it enhances that motion. So once again, we're sitting on a 1 chord. We'll go straight to our diatonic 4 chord. And then we're going to borrow in the lowered scale degree 6, making it a minor 4 chord. And then we can go to a 5 chord, we go straight back to a 1 chord. In fact, that sort of thing we hear a lot in some music theater literature, is that sort of plagal cadence embellished by going from the major 4 to the minor 4 back to tonic. If we did that on a 2 chord, I'll make it a 2/6 chord. Then we can do something like this, a nice diminished sounding chord. We've already done the 6 chord as that lowered 6 chord, in which we also have to borrow in scale degree 3. There's only one modal borrowing that typically happens going the opposite direction, that is borrowing one of those scale degrees from the major mode into the minor mode. And it works like this. Here I am in A minor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to the dominant chord. And then I'm going to borrow that major scale degree 3 into the minor mode. That's the only one that happens with any frequency as far as borrowing from the major mode into the minor mode. And we call that raised scale degree 3 a Picardy third. It typically happens at the end of a piece that's written in minor, and it just gives us a nice bright major sound at the end of the piece. So if you're trying to find an example of modal mixture in music, the types of things that you're looking for. First, you're looking for chromaticism. These are chromatic chords or chromatic melodic notes that show up in the music. They are always lowering chromaticism when we're borrowing from the minor mode into the major mode. So we're going to be looking at adding flats or using naturals to cancel out sharps. So if you see lowering chromaticism, especially on scale degrees 3, 6, or 7, chances are you're dealing with modal borrowing. And then you check what scale degree is being lowered and see what that does to the underlying chord, and that's how you'll find modal mixture. Now, the other important point to make here is that modal mixture is different than modulation. If you checked out my video on modulation, you'll remember that I defined it as the change of tonal centers. That is, we are changing the tonic pitch. When we do modal borrowing, we're not changing the tonic pitch. A major and A minor share the same tonic. So we're not shifting our tonal center at all, we're just borrowing scale degrees from the parallel major or minor mode into our piece of music. So in that sense, that's a little bit different than modulation. And we can start to think about major and minor keys that are parallel, that share the same tonic, as really being two versions of the same thing, two sides of the same coin. When singing these sorts of things, what you're going to be looking for are those scale degrees that are altered. Usually it's 3, 6, or 7 that are lowered. And a good drill to practice to get ready to do that is singing all of your scale degree patterns, including the ones from the parallel minor. So you'll remember, if you check out my video on scale degrees, I taught you how to sing your scale degree patterns in the major mode and how to sing your scale degree patterns in the minor mode. And if we mash those two things together, put them into one thing, then we can come up with all of those possible scale degrees. And it sounds like this. 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 6, 5, 3, 1. That's the weird one because it uses the lowered 6 and the raised 3 in it, but that's modal borrowing for you. 6, 5, 3, 1, 7, 6, 5, 3, 1, 7, 1, 7, 1, 7, 1, 5, 1. I've now sung all the scale degrees that can be used in both the major mode and the minor mode, and if I can hear all the music that I'm singing or playing as scale degrees in that key, then that helps me get ready to perform it. Well, that does it for this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure you like it. Feel free to leave constructive comments below. And as always, make sure you subscribe to my channel for the latest music theory bites as they become available. Until next time.